Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. You see, contrary to mainstream media, it is my belief that Black men are actually thriving and experiencing unprecedented levels of success in the world today. And my goal is to showcase and highlight Black men who are blazing new trails in all segments of society. And my guest today is definitely a man who is doing just that. His name is Mark Tuggle, and he is the author of Cultural Silence and Wounded Souls: Black Men Speak About Mental Health. He's also an activist, an educator, filmmaker, a playwright, a poet, and a same gender-loving spiritual being. And I'd never heard that before, but I really love that title. And so without further ado, Mr. Mark, welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes. How are you?
Thank you, Coach Taylor. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. I love the premise of your show.
All right. So before we jump into your book and your work, let's start off with a few sentence completion. So complete these sentences. I really love to
Be of service to humanity.
My superpower is
Unconditional love.
I am proud of
Being an independent author at the age of 63.
life is
An unfolding journey of unlimited possibilities.
one thing I'd like to change about the world is
The U.S. Constitution.
the future is
The future is up to our children.
now, I'd like you to name a woman who's had a powerful impact on your life.
That will be my mother, who's 97.
And her name is
Mary Tuggle.
Mary Tuggle. All right. And name a positive male role model you look up to.
That will be my father, Lawrence Tuggle, who transitioned in 2009.
My condolences for your loss there.
Thank you.
Now, if you were going to be trapped on an island for 30 days and you had to take one book with you, what book would you take?
I would take The Evidence of Things Not Seen by James Baldwin.
Okay. And what does Mark like to do for fun?
For fun, I like to shop at a thrift store.
So, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I'm very optimistic about the future in general.
Okay. Now, I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness: A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose. And in the book, I talk about the feelings of onlyness that, kind of unique challenges that we as Black men face when we're in positions or in environments where we're the only person of color. I'm certain you've probably been in that situation. So how do you deal with onlyness or is that an issue for you?
I wouldn't say it's an issue, but it's something I have experienced throughout my life. It can be challenging emotionally. I've felt alienated, isolated, misunderstood, unappreciated. So when that happens, I pray and I ask God for His will to be done, so I can show up with my best self.
Nice. So now I want to give an opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience. So introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
My name is Mark Tuggle. I'm 63. I'll be 64 August the 6th. As you said, I'm an author, educator. I've been a mentor to a young Black male for over 21 years. It's one of my most proudest experiences. Single, no kids, I live alone in the village of Harlem. And I'm just really happy that God has used me as a vessel to be part of the storytelling of Black men who are challenged with mental health and mental illness. And that's what my book is about. It's an intergenerational anthology.
Nice. So first of all, let me acknowledge you for your courage to not only write the book, but to bring awareness to the topic of mental health, specifically for Black men. One of the reasons I launched this show is because there are few resources where we as Black men can come together and have these types of conversations that I know can literally change men's lives. So again, I just want to first of all acknowledge you for taking the time to put this together and to engage in this conversation. And with that being said, I'm curious. So what type of feedback have you received so far from the book?
It's been very affirming, very inspiring. I've met so many Black men who have said, Mark, this is what we need. We need to have more dialogue around mental health. We need to hear more stories around mental health. We need solutions. We need tactics. We need more awareness. We need education. We need a language. We need vocabulary. And not just Black men, but I live in Harlem. Harlem is now multicultural. And I've had people from all walks of life say to me, Mark, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's necessary because many of us are suffering in silence. There's the shame, there's the stigma, there's the suicide rates. The highest rate of suicide today in the United States are Black boys aged 5 to 12. And nobody's talking about it. So it's like a silent killer. And we have so much trauma that we have not addressed for centuries. And now is the time for us to talk about our truth.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into that in just a moment. So I'm curious, though, have you also received any negative feedback?
No. No. I have not. I have not.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in terms of, obviously, my personal belief is that collectively speaking, men are actually waking up. And as a certified life coach for men, I see it all the time. Men are, sort of tired and frustrated with the old paradigm of masculinity, because I believe that old paradigm is no longer sustainable. And the primary reason for that is because women's roles have changed so dramatically, men's role have to follow. And I think that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. So I'm curious, though, has any of the responses or the comments people made about your book surprised you?
Surprised me. Well, I've had Black women who tell me that they don't know any men who talk about how they feel, who talk about their hurt and their pain and their trauma. And that is a surprise to hear them say it out loud.
Yeah.
It's one thing for me to have a thought about it, or me even to be assuming about it, but for hear them to say it out loud to me and to see the sadness and the frustration on their face and their energy, that has been a surprise. And so they really welcome this opportunity.
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit, and I'd like you to share what it was like for Mark as a child, and just kind of give us a little background of Mark, say around 10 to 15 years old. Tell us a little bit about Mark. What was Mark doing? What was Mark like? What was your life like back then?
Well, that was a very traumatic time in my life. You know, I have been physically and sexually and verbally abused more than once, and I never talked about it. And so I felt unloved. I felt lonely. I felt disconnected. I felt sad. I was really unhappy. I didn't know where I fit in. You know, I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't really seem to have any sense of purpose. I mean, I was good in school and sports, but emotionally, I was homeless. And there were no Black men in my life that I felt safe to trust with my inner worlds. And so I kept those feelings to myself. And, you know, feelings can be dangerous when there's no outlet for them. And my feelings became secrets, you know, and families and secrets are a dangerous combination, because if you tell a secret, it can break your family, but if you keep a secret, it can break your spirit. And so during those years, I just felt broken and empty. And I didn't have a lot of friends. I started smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, drinking, just to escape, to numb the pain and the hurt. So those were difficult years for me, Michael.
Yeah. Now, on your book cover, it says you are a same gender loving spiritual being. When did you know that?
Probably about, I don't know, 26, 27 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you familiar with that term?
Well, I see. Yes, I never heard it before, but in reading one of your stories of you were talking to a therapist, and the therapist was trying to call you gay, and you said you weren't gay, you were a same gender loving spiritual being. So I'm assuming that's what that meant. So you want to clarify that for me?
Well, I'm attracted to men.
Okay.
And the term same gender loving was created in 1989 by Cleo Monaco, who actually wrote the foreword to my book.
Okay.
And the term is designed to resonate with the uniqueness of Black life and culture in the spirit of self-determination, which is one of the spiritual principles of Kwanzaa. So instead of being, you know, we learn, what is it saying? We create for ourselves, we define ourselves, we name ourselves, and we speak for ourselves, instead of being created for, defined, named for, and spoken for by others.
Mm.
So it's important to me as a critical thinker to affirm my culture and to identify in a way that resonates with my ancestral wisdom.
Ah, okay. Well, I like the title personally. I think it's unique. I think it's, I love how you explain that. Yeah. With that being said, how did your parents react when they knew or found out that that was your preference?
Wow. Well, when I was 20 years old, my father caught me and my partner at that time having sex in his furniture business. That's how I found out.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have written about this publicly, so it's not the first time, but that's how he found out. And then he told my mother. I don't know what he told my mother specifically. My mother's a devout Catholic. We never talked about sexuality in my family. It's another taboo subject in the Black community. But she took me to breakfast one day and said, Mark, I just want to know, is it true? And she didn't say what it was. She just says, this is 1980, right? I'm 63. I got a baby face. And I said yes. And she said, well, I just want you to know I'm not ashamed of you, but you're in for a difficult life.
Mm.
And she was right. She was right. It has been very difficult, very challenging. I mean, I have love for myself today, but it's been a very dark and difficult road for so many reasons.
Now, you said she was Catholic. Is that what you said?
My mother's a devout Catholic, yes.
And so what was your experience with Catholicism or going to church as a kid? What was your experience?
I didn't. I didn't. When I was 9 years old, my mother took me to her church. I didn't want to go. I want to stay at home, watch TV. But I remember the pastor said that homosexuals are not allowed in here. And that was the last time I went.
Mm.
Yeah. So I just, homosexuality to me is a larger question around manhood and also racism and colonialism, imperialism, and so forth and so on. So we never talked about that in my family. And it just became like a secret.
Mm.
So I value an eclectic approach to spirituality. I don't follow a religious path. I respect people's beliefs, but there's certain beliefs that my mother has, my father has, I just didn't agree with. And so we have those differences.
Now, was your dad a Catholic also?
No, no. My mother would go to church and my father would go to the casino. And one day my father said, Mark, what's the difference between people who pray in church and people who pray in the casino? And I said, I don't know. He said, people who pray in the casino really, really mean it.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds like a cool guy.
Yeah, he was.
I'm curious, Mark. So I can just go back now. I'm also 63. And so I can just imagine your mom being Catholic and you hearing them say that homosexuals aren't allowed in church. Because I know I was brought up Baptist. And boy, I mean, they really demonized homosexuality. And I remember even as a kid, it just didn't make sense to me. Why would God judge somebody on their sexual preference? I couldn't wrap my head around it. But with all that going on, how did it impact you, or did it impact you from an ethnic identity point? For example, we've got all the challenges as Black men, right? We've got all these, 60s and 70s dealing with racism and all of that. And then you've got this additional burden of the label, if you will, homosexuality or whatever. How did that play into your ethnic identity, or did it?
Well, my spirituality is more important than my sexuality.
Okay.
And my cultural identity is more important than my sexual identity.
Okay.
So I've always felt affirmed as, I use the word Black. I know it's not on the map, but like you, 63, so I grew up with James Brown and Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X and so forth. So we grew up with the Blackstone Rangers, the Black Panther Party. I saw them feed, clothe, educate children in my neighborhood. So despite all the racism of the media, I knew that they were doing good for the community. So I always felt good about that. But I went to a private school and there were no Black teachers.
Mm.
And there was only a handful of Black kids. And they told me, if you want to keep something from a Black person, put it in a book. So that took me to the library. So I'm clear about my Black identity. My grandmother, I had a grandmother, she used to use the word colored. I'm not with that. On my birth certificate, under the word race, it says Negro. I am not your Negro, right? So you're right. There's still a lot of us that we're not unified in terms of our cultural identity, but I'm very solid about my Blackness, my ancestral legacy.
Yeah, and I actually get a lot of pushback when I say I don't really relate to African American. I'm Black. That's just kind of the lens, because I don't see it as a color. I see Black as an experience, and I'm absolutely proud of that experience. And that's for me how I identify. Again, I have absolutely no problem with people identifying as African American, but it really just truly doesn't resonate for me. Being Black does for me.
Right. I'm the same way. I don't even like the term people of color.
Yeah.
We are people of culture. Because Black to me is more about culture than color.
Right.
And I believe there's only one race, that's the human race. So some of the beliefs I have are not espoused on CNN or BET or Fox News. So that's why I'm talking to you.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we seldom talk about, especially as Black men, is the impact of childhood trauma and identifying the impact that that has on our lives as an adult, as adults. I know God, I don't know how many times I've heard people say things like, my parents used to beat my butt, but I came out okay, right? And they're in denial of the impact that that trauma has had on their lives. And I know that, again, with your conversation around mental health, you're actually bringing that to light, which again, I really acknowledge you for it because as Black men, we are impacted by childhood trauma, whether we want to talk about it or not. So I'm curious. You mentioned a couple of things, and like yourself, I've experienced, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, in every form. I spent what I call my 7 years of hell in a really traumatic environment. And so, how difficult has it been for you to bring this conversation out and get men engaged in talking about trauma?
It's not difficult for me today because of my journey. I was diagnosed HIV positive over 29 years ago, and a friend of mine suggested I go to therapy. And I thought therapy was for rich, crazy white people at that time, but I took her suggestion, and that led me on a road towards a healthier mental state of mind. And so I got into the habit of talking to professionals about my trauma, my hurt, my pain, my joy, my dreams, my aspirations. It's not all bad or all good. And going to support groups, writing, um, being of service in the community, working as a counselor. So I'm in the habit of talking about where I've been, who I am, what I'm doing. So I'm comfortable. That's why I can tell you the truth about who I am on this podcast. But I could say maybe 30 years ago, I didn't have a voice, and I didn't believe I had a choice. But God, through His infinite wisdom, has sent me so many angels who gave me a space that was safe, where I can be free to talk about myself. When I went to therapy, we didn't even talk about HIV. We talked about the little boy, and all the stuff that I went through as a child that I had never told anybody. And my therapist was female, heterosexual, younger, from Bosnia. We were complete opposites, but it was the first time in my life I felt safe to speak my truth. And I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, and that's a great point because I know that for some men who may be watching this and maybe considering going to therapy, I know that's a really big question because I remember when I first decided to go, the first thing was one of the first questions I asked myself is, do I have to have a Black therapist? And I struggled with that a little at the beginning. When I finally did decide to go to therapy, here's how I found my first therapist. I got a Yellow Pages phone book. I flipped to the therapy section. I put my hand over my eyes like this, and I just did like that. I picked a therapist just randomly. And it turns out she was a white lady. I was in my 30s. She was probably 60 or so, but she was absolutely perfect for me. She was who I needed to be with at that time because number one, she could see right through me. I'll never forget the first time I go in the office and she was asking me some questions about my childhood and stuff, and my response was, "I'm great." Like, I'm okay. She says, "Michael, you're not great. You're not okay. Why are you in the therapist's office?" but she was absolutely amazing. And like yourself, I felt safe around her, comfortable around her, and I knew her intentions were pure. Her intentions were to help me heal. And I picked up on that almost immediately. Because one of the things that I remember telling her, I said, "Look, I can't afford to I can't afford a therapist right there." She says, "Don't worry about paying." She says, "What I need you to do is just commit to coming here and let us do your healing work." And she says, "Don't worry, we'll take care of the rest." and she was very sincere. And so I'm grateful that she was placed in my life at that time, because she in some ways saved my life. Because I was in such a dark place at the time. I didn't have a choice. It was either get help or die. So going to therapy was that springboard that challenged me. So in your experience, I mean, I think I read somewhere you were sort of leaning on this, talking about that. How important is it for a person? Do you think they have to have a person of the same color to be effective in therapy, or no?
I don't think they have to. I mean, I think everyone has to decide, what their beliefs and values are. I think it would benefit Black men to consider a Black male therapist, but I don't think it should be a litmus test or a barometer for growth and healing. I mean, you and I have had different experiences. And, in the United States, only 4% of psychotherapists are Black men anyway. So it's really difficult to find someone. I mean, you can go on Instagram and LinkedIn and you can find a bunch of clinicians, but it's difficult, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And
And
again,
also,
go ahead.
I was going to say, therapy is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I advocate for people to start their own support group. Call 3, 5, 10 of your homies, meet once a week, once a month, get some pizza and some water, whatever, and just chop it up for an hour. Because not everybody can afford a mental health professional. Some people don't have a job, some people don't have insurance, some people don't have the time. So there are other avenues, but therapy does work and it is helpful and it is something worth exploring.
Yeah. And again, I want to remove the stigma, especially for Black men, that asking for help is a sign of weakness, because it's the complete opposite. Asking for help is the greatest show of strength that you'll ever exhibit. If you're courageous enough to say, I need help, then you've laid the foundation to transform your life. And until you're able to do that, you can't change your life. So that's where it begins. And like I said, I think the good news is there's so much more awareness now around this topic. When I first started writing back in 1995, actually, I wrote my first book called Brothers, Are You Listening? A Success Guide for the 90s. And I was talking about therapy. And I remember going on a radio show and being attacked by Black men for talking about therapy. Calling me weak and all of that. But now there are support groups all over the place. There's Black male coaches now that we didn't have back then. So once again, I'm extremely optimistic about the future. The fact that we're even having this conversation, fuels my reasons for optimism. So in terms of transformation for the viewers, again, therapy is one of many modalities you can use to do it. Mark has mentioned, starting a support group, and support groups are powerful if you have the right group with the right intention. Now, if you just want to get around, hang around and drink beer and talk about politics, that's a little different than what we're talking about here. Creating a safe container, a safe space where men can come and really speak openly about the stuff that we have to deal with every day. It's so empowering, but yet at the same time, not a lot of men are courageous enough to do it. I also want to speak to the fact that I do also believe it's important for Black men to have spaces with other Black men, because we do have some unique experiences that other cultures can't necessarily relate to. And I know that there's almost a magic that happens when Black men allow themselves to be real and vulnerable with each other. Like I said, I facilitate workshops for Black men and having and creating that container where Black men have the freedom and the safe space to just be who they are. It's so powerful, so transformative. So again, if you're considering therapy, first of all, know it's not a sign of weakness. Secondly, know that there is support out there for you if you're courageous enough to engage in that support, however that looks. So I'm curious, Mark, other than therapy, what are some of the other things that you've done that has helped you heal and grow?
Prayer has been a source of inspiration. I pray every day. I begin every day praying for God's will. Meditation has helped me tremendously. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Yoga has helped me. Acupuncture has helped me. Writing has helped me. I do a gratitude list every 90 days. I write down 20 people, places, and things I've been grateful for. I've done it consistently for over 28 years. Exercise has helped me a great deal. Going to the gym, going to the park, working out at home, YouTube videos. Comedy has helped me. You know, if I'm feeling depressed or sad or alone, I put on Richard Pryor or Robin Harris, you know what I mean, or Patrice O'Neill, and it just, my mood is completely shifted, you know, because in many ways, mental illness is a mood disorder, depression is a mood disorder. So I need my mood to be more vibrational. Nutrition has helped me a lot. Eating organic and vegetarian food, that has been a great source. Going for a walk. I'm 2 blocks away from the northern end of Central Park. So I got Central Park, Morningside Park, Riverside Park. So just walking around the block, you know, anybody can do that. You can walk around the block 3 times. That can be your exercise for the day. So there's so many things to do to feed your spirit and to get your energy going and to get out of your head, because sometimes it can be dangerous up here. So it could be a lot of bad weather up here, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are just some of the things I've done.
Now, I want to circle back on your gratitude list and journaling. Journaling by far is one of the most powerful processes I've used for healing. I remember when I went to therapy for the first time, and one of the first assignments I was given by my therapist was to just go home and write down whatever I could remember about my childhood. And when I did that, wow, I mean, it's amazing how just focusing my attention and then bringing back up some of the stuff that I had suppressed for so many years, the trauma, the abuse, and being able to get that out on paper. And I remember, matter of fact, I still have the journal. That's almost 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I still have the journal with the tear stains on the pages from me writing up, you know, some of the experiences I had, how I felt at the time, and the pain that I was experiencing. But the healing that came from that is unbelievable. And I know that as men, we may be hesitant to think about doing this, but journaling simply gives you the tools to bring awareness to the places where you're stuck, the places where you may have suppressed and repressed some trauma or some pain that needs to be released. Now, I'm a firm believer, this is just my belief, that pain trapped in the body manifests in negative ways until it's released. And if we aren't willing to feel and heal that trapped pain, it's going to show up in other areas of our lives. So we have to be willing to do that healing work to let go of that pain. And I know for me, journaling was one of those tools that helped me do that. And also being with the therapist allowed me to feel, heal, and release that pain. So for those of you who are watching and you may be wondering, what is this therapy stuff, this journal stuff? It's really about, my belief, it's about healing past traumas and pain. And when we do, we become free. That's kind of how I see it. And with that being said, Mark, you also mentioned meditation. And when I was growing up in the Baptist church, I remember the minister saying something to the effect that meditation was trafficking with the devil, and you weren't supposed to do that stuff. That was just wrong. And that another thing that even as a kid just didn't make sense to me. But I know that for me personally, meditation is I'm a huge proponent of meditation, and it has really allowed me to, number one, learn to quiet my mind. But even more importantly for me, it has opened up the floodgates of creativity for me. because I believe that when we learn to quiet the noise of our minds and move into the silence of our hearts, then we can hear the voice of our souls. And so for me, that's what meditation does. It allows me to get past my mind, get into my heart, and hear the voice of God or the soul. And again, it has just been truly, truly impactful. So I'm a huge proponent of meditation. If you're watching this, that's another form, I believe, of healing and growth. Any other comments you have on that, Mark?
No, I agree. But you know, the first time I meditated, I fell asleep. But I kept at it. I've actually been on a spiritual retreat for the weekend where it was complete silence. And that was weird. You know, the whole weekend, complete silence, but it taught me self-discipline and to be present in my relationship with other human beings. And so that's why I pray in the morning so I can be of service, not just to other people, but also to myself, you know, because growing up, I never said, Mark, I love you. So that's the first thing I say. I give myself a hug. I say, Mark, I love you. And so now I feel loved and I am loved. And it's in my heart, it's in my soul. It's not a greeting card. It's not a holiday. It's not a commercial. It's divine. You know, my mother used to always say, God, don't make mistakes. So meditation is a way, like you said, to commune with the soul, the spirit, to be present. It brings me great joy. I love it.
Yeah. Love it. And again, I used to think so much I would get headaches. I'd call them thinking headaches. I think some people might call them migraines, but it was so debilitating, because I couldn't turn my mind off. I'll never forget that. And I remember the very first time I tried meditation, and these were the exact words that popped in my head. This is stupid. Uh-oh, you're becoming one of those new age guys. And the reason I remember that is because I wrote it down in my journal that day. I'll never forget, because I said, I'm going to go try this meditation class. I went to this class, and that was where my mind was at the time. It's like, what are you doing? This is crazy. But I see meditation, learning to meditate is like training a puppy. If you've ever tried to train a puppy to poop in one spot, well, the first thing he does is he runs all over the place. You try to bring him back to this spot, and he poops over here. But if you keep bringing him back to that spot, eventually he gets to the place where he knows this is where I'm supposed to be. And that's kind of how the mind works. As soon as you decide you want to meditate, your mind's going to run all over the place. It's going to bounce all around. It's going to try to convince you, no, you don't want to do this. But if you stick with it, you begin training your mind, just like you do a puppy, to go where it's supposed to go. And we do have complete control over our thoughts if we're willing to pay attention. And that's what meditation helps us do, helps us take control of our thinking. And with that being said, let's kind of lean into spirituality just a little bit, because I know for me, as a former atheist, I used to really struggle even with the word God. If I hear the word God, I really kind of get defensive and just didn't want to hear what people were saying, because I had such a negative experience with religion. And at the time, I couldn't make a distinction between spirituality and religion. And I definitely would say that they're two separate things. You mentioned the importance of having that relationship, that connection to something greater than yourself, which you choose to call God sometimes, maybe. So once again, just kind of touch bases in terms of that whole process of healing, right, that you've been on for the last however many years. How significant is that relationship with the divine to you?
It's everything. One of my favorite poets is Rumi. And Rumi says that I don't believe in religion. Love is my religion. Every heart is my temple. And that really spoke to my spirit, because I like to read people with diverse spiritual thought. And as I said, I respect people's beliefs. I don't like it when people try to impose their beliefs on me. I've had to let go of a couple of friends because they just became very fanatic and possessive and intolerant and self-righteous, and it was just very unattractive to my spirit. So I had to let them go. I pray, I meditate, I listen to people. I don't go to a building because I don't need to, because God is within me. And so I have an intimate relationship with a loving God, and that's enough for me.
Yeah.
That's enough for me. You know, the first thing I do when he wakes me up, is I say thank you. Thank you is a form of humility. Like, thank you for waking me up. To me, that's my grace. That's my space for grace. Thank you. Help me to be of service to humanity. And my prayer is very simple. You know, just thank you. Thank you. Because I've been through hell and back. And I'm still here to tell my story and to be of service. I don't get it right all the time, but I pray every day, Michael, I do not miss prayer, right? And I meditate regularly, and it shows up in other ways in music. I used to hate gospel music.
Mm.
Now I love it. But that's because there was so much pain attached to the music and the dogma and all that kind of stuff. But now my heart is open, my mind is open, and I'm free to be myself and not judge people for what they believe in. Just don't tell me to go to church on Sunday just because you go to church on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like yourself, I'm a huge fan of Rumi. And one of my favorite lines, he says, "Let yourself be drawn by the silent pull of that which you love. It will never lead you astray." And when I read that, it just really just sort of touched me at a really deep level. Let yourself be silently drawn by that strange pull of that which you love. I just love that. It just really speaks to me. So we're here to talk about cultural silence and the wounded soul and wounded souls. So first of all, how long did it take you to put that whole book project together?
It took me 4 years.
Okay.
And halfway into it, Michael, my computer crashed and I lost the whole book.
Oh.
I lost the whole book. But thank God I had the presence of mind to print out all of the stories and the resources so it was on paper. But when I lost the book on my computer, I went through a dark depression for months. I couldn't type. I couldn't read. I was despondent, disgusted. It was just a mess, but I kept praying. I kept praying. I kept praying. And eventually I had the strength to get back on the computer, and now it's out in the world. But you know, I don't believe that God tests me. You know, I didn't save the information. That was my fault.
Right.
I had a friend said, "Mark, why don't you buy a chip and save it?" But I didn't listen. You know, me being stubborn. So, you know, we always talking about, oh, you know, God tests you. I don't believe that.
Right.
At least not in this situation. So yeah, it took me 4 years, and it was published last March on Amazon. It's on paperback, it's on Kindle. Here it is right here. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited. I'm 63 years old. I'll be 64 August 6th. And I have a whole new career. I didn't see that coming 5 years ago.
Nice.
But
Nice.
just goes to show, man, just my faith. You know, God opened my mind and he put this on my spirit. And I kept at it through perseverance, resiliency, steadfastness, and here we are.
You know, interesting. We share very similar stories, because I remember when I started writing my first book, it was in 94. And I really didn't know how to use a computer. And I had just bought this computer. I was just trying to figure out how to make it work. So I figured out how to open up the word processing program, right? And so I saw this interview on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I used to love that show. That was my favorite show. Robin Leach. Okay. And there was this lady, she was a romance writer, one of these well-known, you would probably recognize her name. But anyway, she said every day, she wrote 10 pages. She said sometimes it take her 10 minutes, sometimes it take her 10 hours. but every day she wrote 10 pages. Well, when I saw that, I had already committed to writing this book, and I said, well, what if I could just write 5 pages a day? And I thought, let's try that. So I got this computer. Again, still didn't really know how to use it. It took me about 10 hours, to write my 5 pages, right? And as I was finishing up, again, I didn't know how to really use the computer, but somehow I hit the button, and instead of hitting save, I hit no. And I lost that whole 10 hours of what I had written that day. And I remember just kind of freaking out, like, where did it go? It's got to still be there somewhere. So I happened to have a guy, that friend of mine, that knew a little bit about computers. He says, no, man, it's gone. You can't get that back. And I was like, dang. But it didn't deter me. I said, all right, I got to start all over. So the following day, I sat down. It took me about 8 hours because I remembered a lot of the stuff that I had written, but I remember just the feeling of accomplishment, just finishing those first 5 pages. And I went, you know what? This is doable. I can do this. And so I actually ended up writing my very first book. It took me 90 days. 90 days. And again, it was a mess. It was a mess, but because of my commitment, right? Every day I'd write 5 pages. And just like she said in the interview, sometimes it take me an hour or 2, sometimes it take me 10. But I was waiting for a grant that I had applied for, and I had 90 days before I was going to get that money. And so I said, I want to finish this book before I got the money. And it worked out. I finished it within the 90 days, which was kind of cool.
How many pages was your first book?
150. It was 43,000 words, I think it was, if I remember correctly. Yeah, in the regular 6x9 format, it was about 100, close to 150 pages, 143 pages.
That's great. And I can identify with that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, feels good.
Nobody can take that away from me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, so for those who are watching, again, this show is Shatter the Stereotypes, specifically for Black men to empower them. So tell the men, why should they pick up a copy of your book?
I think they will see a part of their soul reflected with the stories. There's 30 different men, and they write about anxiety, depression, isolation, loss, stress, trauma, PTSD, suicide ideation, paranoid schizophrenia, drug misuse. And I think, some of the issues, in addition to those very painful issues, I think that Black men will see a part of themselves reflected in other Black men who share openly about what's going on the inside. Because, some of us are very successful, some of us are married, we have homes, we have degrees, we're credentialed, but you can't see what's going on the inside. Not every Black man feels good about themselves. Not every Black man is happy with who they are as a human being. And I think it helps to see someone who, like you and I, we've struggled, but now we're on the other side of that struggle, and we're using our story, like God has transformed my private pain into public purpose. And so they'll feel less alone, less afraid. I think it's important to ask yourself 3 questions. What can I do? Where can I go? And who can I talk to? And if you're a Black man with mental health challenges, if you can answer those 3 questions, you'll find those answers and resources in the book in terms of the stories and the resources. Yeah.
And again, I think it is imperative that we as Black men engage in these types of conversations in books. You mentioned it earlier, the old adage that if you want to keep something from a Black man, put it in the book. And I know that there's still this stereotype that we don't love reading and we don't love books. As a writer, obviously I dispel that stereotype, but I think it's important for us as Black men to really commit to our own personal growth and development. And one way to do that is through reading books. I know books in some cases have literally changed and saved my life. And that's one of the reasons why I write books, because I know the power that comes from books. So for the men out there who are watching this, you can tell a lot about a person by the books he's read. Tell a lot about a person from the books he's read. And so if you're the type of person that's watching this show, that's committed to this movement, you know I'm all about personal transformation. And I know that this book can provide you with some insights, some awareness that can support you on this journey, because that's what it is. We're all on this amazing journey. And sometimes we just need to hear other stories of other men, because I know when I first started this journey, I didn't think anybody would be able to relate to my pain. You know, as a Black man, I thought, you know, I was kind of all alone and nobody could relate. But the truth is, we are all the same. We all basically deal with the same stuff. The question becomes, are we courageous enough to address those things that are keeping us from being who we were born to be? So I'm curious, Mark, how difficult was it to get the men to share their stories with you in this book?
That's one of the reasons why it took longer than it might have. And oddly enough, the 30 men, I may have had 8 telephone conversations. You know, we live in a digital world where people are less likely to pick up the phone because you can DM and you can text and you can email, and you know, social media is everywhere. And I got a lot of just indifference, you know. But the men who did tell their stories, I'm so grateful that they were courageous enough to do so. Paul Laurence Dunbar says that we wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. And so for many Black men, or some Black men, there's that mask. And you talked about being vulnerable. You know, we need to shift that paradigm. Being vulnerable is a sign of humility. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of courage. It's a sign of manhood, right? Not neighborhood, but manhood. And so it was a challenge. But I'm grateful for these 30 men who have blessed me with their heart, their mind, their soul. And I believed in myself and I kept at it, and here we are.
Now, were you surprised by how open and vulnerable the men were in their writing? Because I've read a few of them. I hadn't read all of them, but I read a few of them, and it's some really powerful stuff in there. Were you surprised by how open they were?
Very surprised. In fact, more than one male wrote about their multiple attempts to die by suicide. And thank God they're alive to tell their story. Suicide is the leading cause of death of Black men ages 25 to 34. And it's a silent killer. You know, when you walk down the street, you don't know what someone's going through.
Right.
To see the outside, you know. Just recently, Regina King talked about her son Ian, who ended his life. And she said it was a choice. It was his choice. She respected it. And she said he tried medication, he tried psychiatry, he tried therapy. He was in an institution, but he said, "Mommy, I don't want to live anymore." And you know, that was his experience. And so there's a few men who wrote about that, and they tried it more than once. You know, so that was a surprise to me. But I was so grateful that they had the humility to be honest about their personal experiences, and I know that's going to help somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of us don't talk about how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so we end up at the bar, the casino, eBay, Popeye's chicken at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? We can become very irresponsible and self-destructive when we don't talk about how we feel. And it helps to have people who understand, who have compassion, empathy, and kindness and respect, and pick up the phone. That's why I advocate for a support group of your own. And you can set your own hours, your own time. You can decide who can come, who can't come. You know what I mean? And just chop it up. Just chop it up, man. And I know that'll make a difference. It's made a difference in my life. And I know brothers who do that, you know, because again, everyone can't afford a mental health professional.
Right.
And that's okay. It's not the only way to heal.
Right. Right. Now, did you personally know the men from the book, or how did you find the guys that wrote their stories?
Most of the men I do not know. I hit them up on social media. I just, you know, because you know, I'm on social media every day: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I refuse to call it X. So, you know, I'm reading people's bios and I see what they're doing in the community. And I just, you know, I would go in and I ask them, you know, my name is Mark, I'm editing a book. Would you be interested? And that would kind of like start the dialogue. And, you know, over a period of time, first it was going to be 15 men, then it was 20, and I stopped at 30. I thought 30 was a nice number. And my book is like yours, like about 150 pages. And so yeah, it was a journey, but it was a worthwhile investment.
Mm. Now, were any of the men in the book close friends of yours or no?
There's two people who are friends. There are other people who I know personally. We have a relationship. Friendship is a word that I've had to discern over the years.
Mhm.
I thought if I like you or you like me, you're my friend. I was wrong about that. I've had to really rethink or reimagine what friendship really means. So most of the guys I've never met. We've only met through digital, you know, emailing and texting. So yeah.
Final question. Did you learn anything new about yourself as a result of putting this book project together?
Anything new about myself? I learned that I have a capacity to be open to perspectives that I don't agree with.
Mm.
And that really taught me a great deal of humility, you know, because even though they were sharing their story with me, I wanted to take this out and replace with what I was thinking. But I remember watching a documentary with Toni Morrison called The Pieces of Me. And she talked about how when she became an editor, she realized it's not her story, right? She was just a vehicle that was being used, right? And that really helped me a great deal to just get out the way, let them tell their story in their own words, in their own ways. This is Black Men Unplugged, right? It's not being sponsored by McDonald's or Nike, Verizon. They get to tell their story. And that really helped me a lot. I didn't know I had that in me. So that taught me a lot about myself.
Nice. Nice. So if people are interested, how can they find more about the book? How can they find you? Here's your commercial right now. Your opportunity.
Yeah, I'm Mark Tuggle. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And I have a website, culturalsilencewoundedsouls.com. Culturalsilencewoundedsouls.com. The book is on Amazon. It's through paperback and through Kindle. My email address, mjt975@msn.com. I would love to hear from people. And I'm somebody who gets back with you. You know, I'm very proactive in communication. If it takes me more than 3 days, that means I'm going through something. And I'm always going through something. So, you know, I try to get back with people.
So I'm going to be putting a link
Okay, cool.
below the video. Would you want it to go to that particular site? Which site did you want to go to?
Yeah, they can go to my website, but also I can provide you with the social media as well.
Yeah, just shoot me an email. Just tell me which web address you want the link to go to. Wherever you want to go, I can point it. So you just tell me where you want to go when I put it up on the YouTube channel.
Okay, I'll definitely do that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to give you an opportunity, Mark, to share your final words of wisdom, whatever is on your heart to share.
I just want to say thank you. You know, thank you for this opportunity to dialogue with you, to get to know a little bit about you and vice versa. I hope the men and women or whoever's listening benefited from our conversation. I hope they learned something. I hope they're willing to buy your books as well if they haven't already. And I just hope this was useful. You know, I'm a Leo. Okay, I love to talk. I love to talk. So, you know, I enjoy these types of venues. And you're right. It's so important that Black men have a space where they can engage in dialogue and communicate openly, freely, honestly, courageously. Because it takes courage to tell the truth, but it takes integrity to live the truth. And that's where I'm headed towards, is cultural humility, spiritual integrity, and personal autonomy.
Well, again, man, I just want to acknowledge you for your willingness to put this conversation out there the way that you have through your book, through your conversations. And without question, you're making a positive dent in the universe. And like I said, I think sometimes we may not hear it or see it, but I just know that when we speak from this place of vulnerability and authenticity, men's lives are changed. So again, I just want to acknowledge you for what you're putting out there and for the conversation that you're having to engage brothers in these types of conversations. Because my personal belief is this is the only way we're going to heal our communities. And it starts one man at a time, and politicians not going to be able to do it. Government's not going to be able to do it. We have to do it. So again, acknowledge you, brother, for what you're doing. Congratulations on your book. By the way, do you have another one coming up?
No, actually, my next project is a documentary.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, let me know when you get that going, man. I'd be glad to have you back, help you promote it.
Thank you. Thank you. I will.
All right. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. And I can't emphasize enough, brothers, the importance of mental and emotional health. There is help available, support available if you're courageous enough to seek it. It's out there. Don't allow the media and the negative stories keep you from reaching your fullest potential and discovering who you truly are, because it's your responsibility to figure that out. And I think God has given you the tools, but you got to be willing to put forth the effort. So again, we do this show to showcase and empower, and I hope this conversation has empowered you. So we'll see you next episode. Take care.
Thank you.